She had 4 children with her own grandfather. This is the dark and disturbing history of the Caldwell family, inhabitants of the Missouri mountain depths, where for generations, geographical and social isolation has paved the way for practices that defy not only the laws of society but also those of human nature itself. In the early 1950s, while the rest of America thrived in the post-war period, there remained communities practically untouched by progress among the dense forests and hidden valleys of the Missouri mountains. On a 40-acre property, far from main roads and virtually invisible to the outside world, lived the Caldwell family. The first news of the Caldwells reached authorities in 1957 when a lost hunter chanced upon the property and witnessed something that deeply disturbed him. Children with visible physical characteristics of genetic degeneration worked alongside adults whose countenances suggested too close a kinship. The family patriarch, Harold Caldwell, born in 1897, ruled the small clan with an iron hand. A widower since 1943, when his wife Mabel passed away during the delivery of their third daughter, Harold had moved further from civilization, creating his own rules and establishing an isolated microculture where his word was absolute law. What happens in the mountains, stays in the mountains. This was the unofficial motto of the isolated families in this region, and for the Caldwells, it became the justification for behaviors considered unthinkable anywhere else. Martha Caldwell, born in 1938, was Harold's granddaughter. Her mother, Eliza, had died when Martha was only 8, leaving her in her grandfather's care. What authorities would discover years later would surpass the limits of human understanding. From the age of 13, a forbidden relationship was established with her own grandfather, resulting in the birth of 4 children between 1952 and 1957. Preliminary investigations revealed a pattern of consanguineous unions dating back generations in the Caldwell family. The isolation was not merely geographical but ideological. Harold, whose own parents were first-degree cousins, had grown up with the distorted notion that keeping the bloodline pure was a tradition to be preserved. Dr. William Reynolds, the rural doctor who first documented the case for authorities in 1958, described it as the most extreme example of human degradation through prolonged consanguinity he had witnessed in 30 years of practice. The children showed clear signs of genetic problems, reduced stature, atypical facial characteristics, obvious cognitive difficulties, and in 2 cases, congenital heart malformations, Dr. Reynolds stated in his confidential report to the Missouri Department of Social Services. Most disturbing was the normalization of this reality within that microcosm. Martha, then 20 when authorities intervened, showed clear signs of psychological conditioning and did not fully comprehend that her situation was abnormal. For her, it was the only reality she had ever known. The Caldwell property, with its main wooden dwelling and small outbuildings, formed a family complex where approximately 17 people lived, all linked by close blood ties. The isolation was so profound that some of the youngest children could barely articulate words, having developed their own form of communication almost incomprehensible to outsiders. Check to see if you're already subscribed to this channel. The stories we reveal are fundamental historical documents deliberately kept from official books. Only our subscribers have access to these forbidden truths that shape our society to this day. The history of consanguinity in the Caldwell family did not begin with Harold and his granddaughter Martha. Historical documents recovered by social researchers revealed a pattern dating to the late 19th century when the first Caldwells settled in the Ozark Mountains. Josiah Caldwell, Harold's grandfather, arrived in the region in 1878, fleeing accusations in North Carolina. Records indicated Josiah had already been investigated for improper family practices back home, though the euphemistic language of the time obscured the exact nature of the accusations. In the Missouri mountains, Josiah found the perfect isolation to establish his own kingdom. He married his second-degree cousin, Abigail, and they had 8 children, 3 of whom did not survive infancy due to undiagnosed congenital complications. This first Missouri generation established a pattern of deep distrust of the outside world, raising children without formal schooling, developing their own folk medicine, and rejecting all external interference. These isolated families develop a kind of ideological protective shield, explained Dr. Elena Simmons, an anthropologist who studied isolated communities in the Appalachians and Ozarks during the 1960s. To them, the outside world represents a threat, and any external practice is seen as corrupt or dangerous. The next generation of Caldwells deepened this isolation. Ernest Caldwell, Josiah's son and Harold's father, married his own first cousin, Susan, in 1895. This union, held without official record, produced 5 children, including Harold. Fragmentary medical records from a traveling doctor in 1910 indicated all of Ernest and Susan's sons bore distinctive signs of consanguinity, short stature, severe dental problems, and a tendency to chronic respiratory diseases. Harold, born in 1897, grew up in this environment where inbreeding was normalized. In 1920, he married Mabel Jenkins, a young woman from an equally isolated neighboring family. What wasn't documented then, but discovered in 1958, was that Mabel was actually his second-degree cousin on her maternal side. Harold and Mabel had 3 children, Daniel, 1923, Eliza, 1927, and Ruth, 1943. Mabel died during Ruth's delivery, leaving Harold to raise the children alone, which intensified his isolation and distress. Eliza, Martha's mother, was briefly married to James Turner, an outsider who worked on road construction in the region. This was one of the few moments new blood entered the Caldwell lineage. However, James abandoned Eliza when she became pregnant, and she returned to the family property with her newborn daughter, Martha. When Eliza died of untreated pneumonia in 1946, Martha fell entirely under her grandfather Harold's care. Testimonials collected in 1958 suggest it was during this period that Harold began to psychologically prepare his granddaughter for the role he intended her to fill. It's a classic case of conditioning through isolation, explained Dr. Lawrence Hoffman, a forensic psychiatrist consulted during the investigation. With no external reference for normality, the child gradually accepts the distorted reality presented as the only natural one. Martha, growing up without contact with outside children, formal education, or exposure to conventional social values, became the perfect victim for Harold's psychological control. At age 13, in 1951, the forbidden relationship began, resulting in the birth of their first child, Adam, the following year. Between 1952 and 1957, Martha gave birth to 4 children, Adam, Sarah, Joseph, and Rebecca. All showed clear signs of genetic problems from extreme consanguinity. Adam was born with a cardiac malformation. Harold refused to seek medical help, and the boy died at age 3. The official cause was listed as fever, though later investigations pointed to untreated congenital complications. The Caldwell family's fate shifted irrevocably in November 1957 when hunter Frank Weber got lost during a storm in the Ozarks. Seeking shelter, he stumbled upon the Caldwell property and witnessed deeply disturbing scenes. "I saw children who didn't seem normal," Weber later told authorities in Jefferson City. "There was something wrong with their faces, the way they moved. And the way that old man looked at the young girl, it wasn't a grandfather's gaze." Disturbed, and poorly received by the family, Weber was expelled from the property at shotgun point by Harold Caldwell. Upon returning to civilization, Weber reported his observations to local sheriff John Pritchard, who was initially skeptical. However, upon hearing of the children's conditions and the mother's youth, the sheriff felt obliged to investigate. In January 1958, accompanied by Dr. William Reynolds and 2 deputies, Pritchard visited the Caldwell property. What they found confirmed and exceeded their worst suspicions. Martha, then 20, had 3 living children, Sarah, Joseph, and Rebecca, and was pregnant again. All 3 displayed evident signs of genetic issues. Sarah, age 4, could barely speak. Joseph, 3, had a visibly small head. Rebecca, just 1, had distorted facial characteristics. "I was disgusted by what I saw, but even more by Harold's attitude," Sheriff Pritchard later reported. "He showed no shame or remorse. He seemed to consider it his natural right." The initial intervention was complicated by geographical isolation and Harold's violent resistance. When authorities tried to remove Martha and the children, he confronted them with a shotgun, resulting in a tense hours-long standoff. Surprisingly, it was Martha who defused the situation. In a moment of clarity, possibly motivated by concern for her sick child Rebecca, who had a high fever, she agreed to accompany the authorities to get medical help. This decision opened a window to the outside world that would never close again for the Caldwells. Martha and her children were taken to Jefferson City for medical attention and assessment. If you are watching this story, leave in the comments "Blood Speaks" so I know you are following these historical revelations deliberately hidden from official history. Initial medical exams confirmed the worst suspicions. Dr. Reynolds documented multiple signs of prolonged consanguinity, congenital heart problems, severely compromised cognitive development, facial and cranial malformations, short stature, and weakened immune systems. Martha herself, a product of earlier consanguinity, showed similar though less pronounced signs. Most shocking were blood tests revealing the children had extremely high homozygosity, indicating a severe lack of genetic diversity. The methods of 1958 were sufficient to confirm Harold was both grandfather and father. While Martha and her children remained under care, authorities returned to the Caldwell property for further investigation. They found Harold's personal diaries, coldly documenting his intent to purify the Caldwell lineage, along with unreported birth and death records indicating other consanguineous relationships within the extended family. Harold's eldest son, Daniel, had a similar relationship with his own daughter, Mary, resulting in 2 children with severe developmental issues. Harold's youngest daughter, Ruth, had a son whose father was suspected to be her own brother, Daniel. The case's magnitude attracted experts from across Missouri. Dr. Lawrence Hoffman, the forensic psychiatrist, evaluated Martha. Martha Caldwell's case represents one of the most extreme examples of psychological manipulation and social isolation I have ever documented, Dr. Hoffman wrote. She was raised in an environment where the normal limits of family relationships were completely distorted, with no access to any external reference of normality. Initial interviews revealed the depth of her conditioning. She showed little understanding that her relationship was abnormal. "Grandpa always said our blood was special," Martha reported. "That outsiders wanted to dilute it, weaken it. It was our responsibility to keep it pure." As the case moved through the judicial system in 1958, doctors meticulously documented the physical and cognitive effects on Martha's children. Dr. James Harrison, a geneticist from Washington University in St. Louis, was invited to examine them. His work, later published in medical journals with identities protected, became a fundamental case study. "What we observed is the accumulated result of multiple generations of consanguineous unions," wrote Dr. Harrison. "Martha's children carry in their genetic code the impact of at least 4 previous generations of marriages between close relatives." Sarah, the 4-year-old, had accumulated recessive features. Her cognitive capacity was severely compromised, her growth was stunted, and she suffered frequent seizures. Her vocabulary was under 10 words. Joseph, 3, had microcephaly, resulting in severe developmental and neurological problems. Rebecca, just 1, suffered from a congenital heart malformation similar to her brother Adam's, requiring immediate intervention to save her life. Martha's 4th child, still in utero when she was removed, was born in April 1958 at Jefferson City State Hospital. The boy, recorded as Baby Caldwell, had multiple complications: a cleft palate, fused fingers, syndactyly, and a complex heart malformation. He died 3 days later. An autopsy revealed defects incompatible with long-term life. Dr. Harrison documented the observable genetic patterns. "We are witnessing the devastating expression of deleterious recessive genes. Extreme homozygosity means these children inherited identical copies of harmful mutations from both mother and father-grandfather, eliminating the protective effect of genetic diversity." The medical team also noted the children's severely compromised immune systems. "It's as if their bodies are fighting a constant battle against their own compromised genetic code," noted Dr. Reynolds. "Their vital energy is so committed to correcting internal defects they have little left to fight external threats." Psychologists documented the emotional and behavioral effects. Sarah swung between apathy and self-directed aggression. Joseph exhibited stereotyped, repetitive movements and an inability to form emotional connections. Rebecca showed significant delays in social milestones. In addition to cognitive deficits from genetic anomalies, wrote children's psychologist Dr. Caroline Meyer, these children suffered severe sensory and social deprivation during their formative years. They were raised without appropriate stimuli or social interaction. The Caldwell case became a landmark study, cited in medical textbooks and training programs for decades. Harold Caldwell's trial occurred in September 1958, held in confidence to avoid sensationalism. Harold, 61, was found guilty on multiple counts, including forbidden relationships, child neglect, and abuse. He was sentenced to 25 years, effectively a life sentence. He expressed no remorse. "I didn't expect people from the outside to understand," were his only words at sentencing. "What we did was for the good of the family." Harold died in the Missouri State Penitentiary in 1967 at age 70. No family member claimed his body, he was buried in the prison cemetery under his inmate number. Martha's path was more complex. Evaluated as a victim, she entered a specialized rehabilitation program in Kansas City. "Martha's case represents a unique rehabilitation challenge," wrote Dr. Elizabeth Parker, overseeing her treatment. "She must not only process her trauma but essentially relearn what family, relationships, and identity mean." The process was slow and painful. A major breakthrough, and crisis, came when she fully realized the universal wrongness of what had happened. She described feeling like the floor had disappeared, reported Dr. Parker. All her understanding of the world and her identity was fundamentally shaken. Martha's children were placed in specialized care. Sarah and Joseph, with the most severe needs, were transferred to long-term care institutions. Rebecca, the least affected, was adopted by a family of doctors in St. Louis. Despite needing multiple heart surgeries, she developed functionality that surprised experts. By 1962, after 4 years of intensive treatment, Martha was deemed capable of semi-independent living. Under a new identity, Mary Wilson, she settled in a small northern Missouri town, working as a library assistant. She earned her high school equivalency diploma. Authorities allowed supervised visits with Rebecca, which gradually evolved into a genuine, if cautious, relationship. Martha never returned to the Ozarks. The Caldwell property was confiscated by the state, sold, and the main house demolished. New owners established a cattle farm, unaware of the site's history. Other extended Caldwell family members were located and received varying degrees of intervention. Daniel Caldwell received a sentence similar to his father's. His daughter Mary and her children received treatment akin to Martha's. The case profoundly impacted child protection policies in Missouri and nationally, leading to protocols for identifying and intervening in isolated communities. Dr. William Reynolds dedicated his career to educating professionals about the signs of consanguinity and abuse, publishing a key manual in 1965. By 1970, Martha, Mary Wilson, at 32, had built a modest, stable life. She remained in therapy but had formed significant social relationships. Though she never married or had more children, she found a balance between acknowledging her past and building a future. Rebecca graduated high school in 1975, an extraordinary achievement given her early prognosis. While not fully independent due to her heart condition, she worked as a volunteer at a children's hospital, using her experience to comfort others. If you've watched this far, it's because you like this story. Leave a comment saying I watched here so I can meet you and know who really likes the stories here on the channel. Be sure to like this video and share it with someone interested in these historical revelations. If you're not yet subscribed, now is the perfect time to join this community unraveling the darkest secrets in American history. Sarah and Joseph, the most severely affected, remained institutionalized. Sarah died in 1978 at 24 from respiratory complications. Joseph lived until 1985, dying at 30, a surprising longevity given his condition. The last official record related to the case was a 1982 letter from Rebecca to the Missouri Department of Social Services, requesting access to the original records. I don't seek these records out of resentment or anger, she wrote. I seek them to understand who I am and where I came from. I believe knowing our story, however painful, is the only way to truly overcome it. The Caldwell history remains a dark reminder of the consequences of prolonged consanguinity, not only genetic and physical, but the profound human cost and suffering, lost identity, and potential never realized. In a final note from her 1980 follow-up assessment, Dr. Parker wrote of Martha, "The real miracle in Martha's case is not that she survived the horror of her initial situation, but that she found, despite everything, the ability to build something like a normal life." There is a resilience in the human spirit that even transcends the most fundamental violations of our nature. The Caldwell property in the Ozarks is now unrecognizable, reclaimed by forest, with no visible trace of what occurred. Yet the genetic and psychological legacy of that isolated valley continues to reverberate through generations, a silent reminder that some secrets, once discovered, can never be truly buried.